So we are here to talk about queer trauma in 2025. So this is our agenda. It looks longer than it is, but just so everybody kind of knows what to expect, we're going to start with some disclaimers and some grounding activities. We're going to go over laws and ethics, and then all the different realms in which our clients are being impacted. So psychological, in policy and legislation, the socio-political climate for our clients, reviewing things like intersectionality, and then talking about our authenticity and advocacy as therapists, fostering resilience and healing, and then things that will help all of us with our burnout, ways that we can support our clients, and then resources so you walk away kind of having everything that you need, which is the hope. So I'm going to start with a small disclaimer. And the disclaimer is that everything that I've shared here is based on empirical research in mental health across various disciplines. So that includes counseling, social work, psychology, marriage and family therapy, and their respective codes of ethics. So to be clear, all codes of ethics for all national organizations and our licensing bodies stipulate that we're actually required to be inclusive in our work and refrain from discrimination based on any identity, not just the identities we're talking about today. And then it's our job to maintain a safe, non-harmful space for our clients. So I want us to keep that in mind when we're moving through this work. I want to honor that we're in some highly tense and tumultuous times. We come here with our own professional and our personal experiences, and all of those are valid and deserve to have space and time. Again, nothing here is meant to minimize anyone's experience or personal story. Instead, I want to hope that we can work together to expand our capacity for supporting marginalized and oppressed populations during times of extreme risk, which can also put our health and well-being at risk. So I just want to invite everyone really quickly. I know as therapists, we're like, of course you want me to breathe. How annoying. However, take that collective single deep breath. Right. I know we're talking about hard things. And I know this is a stressful time for everybody. So just take that collective deep breath in, coming to this with an open mind and an open heart. And as you take that deep breath out, try to release any preconceived notions, judgments, or barriers that you're experiencing right now. And then I want to encourage everyone that feels they are able to just write down any questions that you have before I even get started. Also, any concerns you might have. Just kind of allow yourself to release those for 30 seconds on paper as I get started. And again, you can either unmute yourself if you have questions or wait until the recording is done. Okay, this is the not fun part. So as of May 23rd, 2025, per the ACLU, there are 588 anti-LGBTQ laws on the floor across all 50 states, including Connecticut. We're not as safe as we say we are. And they restrict access to a lot of things that actually also affect non-queer people. It's just people don't see it through that lens. So things like bodily autonomy, right? We know cis women are being forced to be pregnant and give birth, right? They're trying to restrict bodily autonomy for things like gender affirming surgery, which, if we want to look at it any particular way, anyone who needs surgery to feel affirmed in their physical body, that's gender affirming regardless of your identity. Access to medical care, and that isn't just gender affirming medical care, that's also HIV and AIDS treatment. That's also hormone treatment, which we think is just for trans people, but actually any of you that are cisgender that need hormones because of your own medical issues could potentially be denied that should these bills go through. So if you are in menopause and need estrogen, if you have low testosterone for your body as a cis person and you need that, these laws will also restrict your rights and access to your medical care. Also, access to rights for discrimination, which means any of you that identify as cis women, your rights for discrimination have now been taken away, and anyone could discriminate against you just for existing. Also, the care of minors, right? So certain states, not Connecticut, luckily, have made it so it is a DCF CPS call if you allow your child to be trans, allow, quote unquote. We know that the NIH has been restricting research, including us as therapists being able to access the empirical research we need to treat the queer community. Also, access to mental health services, including a bill that's currently on the floor trying to make conversion therapy legal again. And in those states, we as therapists, if we live there, would actually be required to be trained in and perform said form of quote unquote therapy. Shutting down suicide prevention hotlines, again, doesn't affect just queer clients, affects all our clients. Rights to free speech, right? So me saying these things at some point could be illegal federally. As we know, we see in the news a lot, rights to accurate IDs and legal documentation, access to bathrooms, which has been a consistent issue, team sports, which has been a consistent issue, educational censorship, like we saw in Florida, and marriage equality, which people assume is just queer marriage. But when you take away the Marriage Equality Act, you also take away the rights for interracial marriage of any kind. So I want us to see that while these laws are horrible, and there are so many of them, and there will be more by the time I'm done talking, it also affects anyone who is cis and heterosexual because your laws are tied to these laws. And I think that's what makes this so complicated for us as therapists, is there's only so much education we can do for ourselves and our clients. And it becomes scarier when we see it through the lens of reality and not just the lens that the news is reporting it on. And so I share this so we can all kind of have a platform for why this training needs to exist, why we're here, why this matters, and so that you all, with me when this is over, can make plans for how you keep yourself safe, not just your clients. Because my concern is also for all of you, not just our clients. So just a brief reminder, anyone that's been in a training with me is going to roll their eyes because they're like, we know Wednesday loves to talk about implicit bias. However, this is just a reminder. We all have implicit bias, myself included, though it pains me to admit it, right? And again, it's our unconscious bias against people based on any marginalized identity, right? And we're not just talking about queer folks, we're talking about race and ability status, country of origin, the first language somebody speaks. I want us to keep that in mind as we're moving through this. I like to believe that when it comes to queer trauma being in 2025 and how this affects all of us, that we're all doing our best to keep this in check. I will admit it is hard sometimes, but this is our opportunity to work on that. So we're going to start with queer trauma in the US, right? What are the psychological impacts that we're currently dealing with? And again, if you've been to my training, you'll hear about minority stress and trauma again, because that's what we're seeing. And, you know, as I look through the screen, any of you that identifies as a cis woman, any of you that is a person of color, anyone that has any marginalized identity also experiences minority stress, right? So this was a framework that was actually originally created to look specifically at the queer population. Whenever I talk about it, I remind people that it's not just about queer folks. Any marginalized identity experiences minority stress and trauma because we live in America in tumultuous times. This is something that's actually been discussed in academic literature and in empirical research for years. We know it is valid. We know it exists. We know this actually does explain things well. But it really tries to explain to us how things like chronic social stress due to marginalization can adversely affect someone's mental health. And so the way I look at this is, right, I walk through your door, I'm your client. So hello, I'm your client. You're so lucky. I'm an incredibly difficult client. So I walk in and I've got a mobility device and I'm trans and I have whatever diagnoses I have. And instantly right there should be a sign that this person has minority stress and some kind of trauma diagnosis at minimum. That makes your job easier. If you assess that right away within 30 seconds, especially when you're working with clear clients, you're able to validate that experience before they even have to share it with you, which, you know, right now, a lot of queer people are afraid to even come to therapy and talk about it. Because if you're a new therapist and it's not someone you've been working with a long time, they have to hope that you're safe. And the hope of safety from a therapist shouldn't actually exist. It should just be therapists are safe, but we know not all are. And so when we look at this in the context of our current political climate, we know that queer and trans people actually experience not only the burden of daily discrimination, but also acute stress from our current political rhetoric and all of the policy changes and laws that threaten the existence and their rights to exist. And that's really what we're talking about, is someone's right to exist, right? Regardless of whether or not you think an identity is or isn't real, we are talking about a government that thinks people shouldn't exist. And a lot of us come from different cultures and backgrounds where our ancestors have already been through that. And that's something to also keep in mind, is a lot of us will be triggered by some of this. So over time, this actually builds up in someone. So acute and chronic trauma eventually manifests in symptoms from anxiety and depression, and can actually develop into post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think that what I appreciate about the minority stress model is that it reminds us that trauma doesn't have to be the big, scary back alley physical trauma. It can be these political moments over time that build and build and build until someone actually develops a true diagnosis. And often those diagnoses are missed because people don't often see trauma through the lens of socio-political trauma. So that's something for us to also keep in mind. So the thing is, this also has an impact on our community well-being. And again, something we might not think about, right? But trauma is also mirrored at the community level, right? So just because we see 1 to 2 queer people a day doesn't mean an entire community, or our entire community, even people that aren't queer, aren't experiencing that same kind of trauma, right? So I want us to think for a minute. We're all experiencing this, right? We're in this continuous barrage of hostile political messaging, and it can erode our community solidarity and impact our well-being. That's true for all of us. I'm sure a lot of you are tired. I'm looking at faces. We are tired. We are done, and yet we've signed up to be therapists. I'm sure we all have questions about our life choices currently, and that is okay. Because we went into this because we care about people, right? That's the whole point of this, is that we care about people. And so we and our clients are sharing this shared psychological impact. And our clients might find themselves in an environment where they can't safely express their identity or advocate for their rights. Therefore, they're isolating, which further intensifies that sense of marginalization. And I don't know about all of you, but when I see a client doing that, it also stresses me out. I want you to not isolate. I want you to have people and community. All the studies tell me people and community make things feel better. But in our current climate, it's scary to even say what you are. Like, even when someone's reading my bio now, I'm like, nope, I'm not hiding, but I really want to hide, right? And I'm sure for a lot of you, right? I'm not hiding, but I really want to hide because isolation feels safe right now. But we know that impacts our clients' mental health. So as we were talking about, right, recent legislative initiatives that range from bans or severe restrictions specifically on gender affirming medical care to policies around documentation signal a greater rollback on rights for the queer and trans community, right? And so that's the other thing. I tell people all the time, I think I talk about passports in every session right now, which makes me nuts. I don't want to hear about them anymore. However, it's a real safety concern, as is flying. And we can talk about later on, we're going to talk about how we help our clients maintain safety. And for some of my clients, one of those is actually driving to California instead of flying because they don't know what will happen once they're on a plane with their passport, even if it's in country, right? And we know with these restrictive legislation and policy rollbacks, it also means that you can leave the country and not be allowed back in. And I do know people that that's happened to, right? These are real things that are happening. And again, that makes our jobs hard because we're worrying about our client safety. So we know that a lot of these policies create these tangible barriers to healthcare and legal recognition, right? Making everyday activities kind of fraught with that bureaucratic and personal stress and peril, right? And that's the thing. I don't know about all of you, but there are moments with a client or watching the news or in a team meeting where you start to really feel it. It becomes this feeling like it's another person in the room that you wish wasn't in the room. And that can also lead to, as we were talking about, right, chronic stress, anticipatory trauma. I think that's something we don't talk about in trauma-informed care, is the I'm waiting for the trauma, which is trauma in itself, right? So I'm waiting for the bad thing to happen. Oh, the bad thing happened. I'm going to wait for the next bad thing to happen, right? And That trauma of waiting for future discrimination also erodes someone's trust in the system and therefore in us, which on some level is fair in terms of distrust of the system, and on other levels is unfair to us as providers because we are just trying to help people live better lives, right? And our clients are forced to navigate a system that questions and invalidates their identity, and we are working in the system and trying to help them navigate it too while keeping ourselves safe. So then there's this legal uncertainty and insecurity. This is incredibly real for all of us, I think, right now. I think even sitting here, right, being in this training, it can feel like, I'm in this training. Um, but there's a fluctuation in policies, which means that rights that might have been previously provided, a sense of security or validation are under review and legal challenge. The example that I give to people is, and I am fine sharing this, right? So I was assigned female at birth, my partner was assigned male at birth. Our marriage license was the first marriage license in Connecticut to be corrected. I fought really long and hard for that long before we were in this. Now, on paper, our marriage would be at risk if marriage equality was taken away, unless I were to revert to my sex assigned at birth and do that harm to myself. That is what our clients are facing, and that is something we might have to do with them. And I have held the hand of clients who have cried very hard filling out an application to change a gender marker back, to legally change a name back, to undo like years of fighting for a process. And so I think that's something we have to keep in mind is that people might start giving away the things that validate themselves for safety because of these policies, because getting ahead of it for some people feels better than waiting until there's no getting ahead of it at all. The other thing is this is happening really fast, like 588 bills on the floor as of May 23rd, and it's, what is it, June 5th, June 6th? Stuff has passed in the 10 plus days since then, right? So this is happening to the point where we as providers can't even keep up with this, let alone our clients. And it makes it really stressful because I don't know about all of you. I like to unplug from all of this sometimes, but it does make it very difficult. And for a lot of our clients already coping with societal marginalization, the instability compounds that anxiety and trauma because it reinforces the notion that their rights are transient or conditional. And this is impacted further by how many marginalized identities a client has, right? So for example, as a white non-binary person, I can pass in public and am generally safe. For the Black trans women I work with, their lives are at constant high risk every day by existing on many, many levels of marginalization and stateside violence. And those are things we have to consider when we're sitting with our clients. So, we're talking about our socio-political climate. I know it's not our favorite. Um, But we have to look at things like what we call rhetorical hostility and misinformation, right? So this is something that has been done for hundreds of years. Although this kind of propaganda of the way that language is kind of coded and decoded was really made famous in World War II, by the Nazis. They were the best at propaganda and they were the best at kind of that misinformation and the making seemingly non-volatile words and phrases volatile, right? So leaders and political actors will employ language that stigmatizes or demonizes queer and trans communities, right? Like, our children are not safe. Think about that. That is a phrase none of us wants to hear. When we say, because of the queer community, our children are not safe, I want you to think for a minute what comes up for you about what the connotation is there. What's the historical connotation to say that queer people are not safe around children? Or that we're indoctrinating children, right? That means some pretty serious, insidious things that threaten everybody's life and livelihood, and potentially threatens queer parents' right to their own children. And I've seen that where families where there is no abuse, there is no neglect, loving, beautiful homes with foster children lose their children in other states just for being openly queer, right? That is a reality, that's what that rhetoric does. So when political discourse starts to portray communities as out of step of traditional values or a threat to social norms, it influences our public perception and validates prejudice, right? That has been a source of interpersonal discrimination, right? So I'm sure we all hear things like American family values, protecting the American family. Well, what is the American family? Because America was founded on colonization. The true American family is not what we're being taught, but they're talking about a cis mom and a cis dad with two children and a white picket fence and a golden retriever. And that's actually not America. That is not the average American family. But we use these terms in politics. I always say it's kind of like an earworm. It digs itself into your brain, and still those phrases start to trigger those implicit biases until they've just become outright public bias, and as we have seen historically. So again, this hostility, right, and is internalized by a lot of us, right, leading to heightened self-stigma, internalized transphobia or homophobia, which is linked with mental health challenges, right? So people watch the news, we hear that queer people are not safe around children, are not part of American family values. Often religion and spirituality is robbed from queer people, right? We see that happen a lot where people will weaponize like the beauty of religion to demonize a group of people. And that is internalized. And that self-hate becomes very, very serious in terms of developing severe mental health issues. So that's also something that we need to watch with our clients, because internalization is just as dangerous as what's happening around someone in ways that can't be controlled. There's also the normalization of discrimination. We're seeing that now. And I can't see everybody's faces, which I do not blame you. Keep your cameras off for your safety if that's what feels right. But as people were entering and I was seeing faces, I am very aware that a lot of us have experienced discrimination, and that a lot of discrimination that us and our ancestors have experienced is very normalized in this country in a way that it shouldn't be, right? But the amplification of this rhetoric in national debates and media narratives can serve to normalize hostile behavior, which emboldens individuals and groups to express prejudice in overt and covert ways, right? When we see things like mass shootings at synagogues, at churches, at nightclubs, right? We are seeing what the normalization of discrimination and hostile rhetoric turns into, right? So we think it's just words. We think, and like we all do it, right? We watch the news and we make fun of the politicians that we don't like, right? But they're sending a message to their followers, and that can become violent. And those are things we need to be aware of, right? Because this results in, like I was saying, hate crimes, harassment, microaggressions, which are direct triggers for trauma responses in queer and trans people. So I like to remind people that the wheel of power and privilege exists. I will never ever do a training on queer people and leave out all of the other marginalized identities that exist. I do not expect any of you to look at this wheel and start putting things in the chat. I use this to remind people, when we look at ourselves and our clients, we have to think who is the most at risk, right? So if we're looking at queer people, right, we're looking at gender often, and we're looking at sexuality. So we've got a trans client who is, say, a lesbian who comes from a family of immigrants, right? So that's citizenship, has a dark skin tone, no real formal education, maybe is neurodivergent, has a lot of mental health issues, in a bigger body, and no money, and their first language is not English. And we're looking at half of this wheel as being the most marginalized. And then people that aren't us ask, well, why are your clients so traumatized? Well, that's why we live in 2025, and the closer you are to this very outside ring, the more likely you are to have trauma and not access the things that you need. So I think it's important for us to keep this in mind. Something I have done with my students and my supervisees, and I always encourage other therapists to do that when we think about our queer and trans clients is I often will, after I meet with a client, just briefly look at the wheel and make a note about where they are in the wheel of power and privilege, so that as we're meeting and we're figuring out things like resources or just validating an experience, that it is all there mapped out in front of me so that I can have a trauma-informed conversation in a way that really honors the client's lived experience. So trauma, I know, that's all we're going to talk about. But we have to look at intersectionality, like I've been saying, right? So, like I was saying, right, when you have multiple marginalized identities, right, including things like race, socioeconomic status, and disability status, which, just so we're clear, in my clinical experience, those are the three marginalized identities that I see intersect the most, that cause the most trauma because of people's discrimination, right? Racism is rampant, it's only getting worse. And the less money you have and the more disabled you are, the harder it is to access spaces. So we have to think, when we think about queer and trans people, who's the most marginalized. So our current political environment doesn't just target sexuality and gender identity, but also all the identities that intersect, right? That systemic oppression has always gone after. So my example is always, right, we have trans people of color that frequently face that layered discrimination, which is compounding stress from racial and gender discrimination, amplified by psychological trauma. And for anyone that feels very passionate about trans people of color, if you go to the HRC, they keep a list specifically of all the trans people that die by hate crimes. And if you look at their faces, the average person is not white. And that's something we really need to consider when we're doing this work, is how at risk is someone based on how our current system is, right? That's why the recognition of intersectionality is crucial to understand the full scope of harm caused by hostility in our political climate. So this is the part that I hope feels a little more hopeful as we move through. I'm a big person for authenticity and advocacy in therapy for not just our clients, but for ourselves and with each other. Authenticity can feel really scary right now. So I just want to be super clear. Also, advocacy can be really scary depending upon the system that you work in, and who you work around and what their beliefs and values are. So I just want to honor that as well. But for therapists to be authentic, we have to be self-aware. Often this means that we're consciously examining our own biases, right? Our positionality, where we land on topics that are currently polarized, like politics, like religion, like laws, and what our emotional responses to socio-political dynamics are, right? So I'm always super honest with people. When I watch the news, I either throw something or cry. It's very black and white for me right now. When I pride myself on being very DBT in my thinking, the gray space is generally really important to me. However, this brings out that part of me, right? We have to keep examining what this brings up for us so that we can be present with our clients. But at the same time, authenticity in that sense allows us as therapists to create a space that's genuine and trusting, where clients are more likely to share their experience of marginalization and trauma. Because the more real we are and are able to be, the more our clients see us as people, right? We need to remember, in any therapeutic relationship, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a case manager, whether you're a supervisor, regardless of our identities, we hold power over our clients by design. If I have to write the letter for you to get care and I use my bias to deny you something, that is a problem, right? I have all the power. I can sway your entire existence in a session. So for me personally, and all of you will do this in a way that works for you, I will label that for clients, right? In the beginning, we talk about harm reduction, intersectionality, and my authenticity, and does that work for them? Because I view the therapeutic relationship with my queer clients, and all clients, but especially my queer clients right now, as a relationship of mutual trust, mutual understanding, mutual safety. If you are working in mental health and you also have marginalized identities, you need that too. That's the other thing. I always say, I might have marginalized identities, sure, but if my therapist is a Black trans woman, I have power over her in the real world that needs to be addressed and discussed so that it's a safe space for her to work with me as a client. So I think that that's a really important thing for us to think about right now is where is authenticity playing a role in the therapeutic relationship and where's power playing a role in the therapeutic relationship right now when our clients already feel decently powerless. So this involves regular reflective practices, right? Such as supervision or peer consultation. I tell everyone if you work in a system and maybe you don't have the best supervisor or a supervisor that doesn't understand your lens, peer consultation and peer support is the greatest thing in the entire world. Genuinely, I love nothing more than a colleague kind of giving me their feedback based on their experience. And this helps us address our own emotional burdens. It helps us avoid burnout when we're grappling with the systemic challenges that are impacting our clients, right? And that helps off this authenticity extend to us being able to be transparent about our values and our commitment to social justice. And clients want to know that. Therapy's changed a lot. I don't know if any of you have ever been interviewed by a client. I've been interviewed with questions written out on a piece of paper, and questions about intersectionality and social justice come up very, very often because people want to be in a room with someone that they know values them, their opinions, and their identity. And it also means if we don't fit the person's bill, that's a good thing for them to know. And I know when we work in community mental health, our clients don't always have a choice, and that does make our jobs a little harder if we're not the perfect fit. So we have to do our best to use our authenticity to make it work. Um, I also think burnout is a big thing. I'm sure if I stopped sharing and I turned off the recording, I asked, raise your hand if you're burnt out, every hand would go up, mine included. Your jobs were hard before all of this, but they're harder now. And a lot of the research on things like authenticity in therapy show that we're actually less likely to experience burnout if that enters the space. So that's something for us to think about. So again, right, while confidentiality and professional boundaries still remain paramount, we can acknowledge the reality of a political landscape and validate our clients' experiences of their socio-political distress without being ethically inappropriate. This is also a reminder that most codes of ethics, can we tell that I've read all of them because I'm like a little nerdy? Um, all of them say self-disclosure an appropriate discussion of reality is okay as long as it serves the client's best interest. And I believe it is our client's best interest that we acknowledge the reality of the landscape we are living in, including potentially our own concerns. Um, for no other reason than, like, again, you all have your rights to your safety too as people that work in mental health. Studies have actually found that the openness doesn't just build rapport, it also creates this really beautiful collaborative environment with our clients where we can actually work together to navigate and understand the impact of those external political stressors on mental health. There's a joining that happens. If you've ever been in a therapeutic relationship where you've gotten to join with a client like that, it is incredibly rewarding. And the burnout from that session seems to be less overall, just because of the way that the engagement in the session has happened. So this is a part that I think is really hard for all of us. I really want to label that I struggle with advocacy right now. And I'm a big advocate. I have no problem being super loud about anybody's rights. And I think right now it can be scary for us. So I offer this to you as information without expectation. Because again, your safety matters, right? But in our current climate, advocacy is not separate from political work. It's actually interwoven into our daily practice, right? To be a present therapist is to be present in our current climate. And we are increasingly expected to navigate the tension between maintaining clinical neutrality and engaging in social justice advocacy. I think clinical neutrality is a really interesting concept. Because again, I'm sure if we weren't being recorded and all of your faces were here in front of me and I asked you, do you think you're clinically neutral? You would probably say no if you knew no one was watching. Because I don't think clinical neutrality is real. That's you being that blank slate that all the textbooks say you're supposed to be that we know doesn't work. If it worked, we'd all do it, and I would not be allowed to do this training, right? Like there's a reality there. And you cannot be clinically neutral and engage in social justice practice. It's actually not possible. It's an oxymoron, right? And so that's something that we have to consider is are we more focused on maintaining that clinical neutrality or showing our clients that we're engaging in social justice and advocacy and allyship if you're not from the queer community in a way that shows our clients that we're not just safe people to talk to, we're actively doing the things that they deserve because that is actually part of our code of ethics, especially if you're a social worker. That's like out there big time. So integrating social justice into therapy and community mental health work might involve using that strength-based, trauma-informed approach where we, again, acknowledge the socio-political roots of a client's distress and validate the struggle as both personal and political, right? Which is the other thing. The political climate doesn't magically make everyone's personal stressors go away. Your clients still need food stamps. Your clients still need housing. Your clients still need safe spaces to recover. Your clients still need parent support groups to get their children back from being in the system. All of that still exists. But I cannot imagine being a parent going to parenting classes, trying to get housing, trying to get food stamps, and all the while the government is going, oh, but here's another hurdle, even though you passed the last one. Here's another hurdle, even though you passed the last one. And then you want me to maintain recovery? That feels like such a wild ask when you like look at it that way. And yet our jobs are to somehow make all of that happen. And I don't know about all of you, but even saying that out loud just made me feel really anxious. Because how do I make all of that happen when the system is stopping me from making all of it happen? And that's where like basic validation is just really real. Calling it what it is just really real because we can only do what the system allows us to do. And I often remind my clients and the people that I work with that if the system is against you, it's against me too. I am with you in this. I have more power. However, we are in this together. So a big part of this is actually using advocacy and therapy to empower our clients to engage in activism safely. Safe activism is really hard right now. I think of clients that go to protests and we have to make plans. I think of clients that have gone to DC, which I'm like, oh, you want to go to one of those protests? I just got so stressed out thinking about it. I'm seeing some faces and I'm like, yes, it really is that stressful to hold that all day, every day, till I get a text message that they're home and they're safe, right? There are plans that have to be put into place. There's extra therapeutic work that happens there. So we have to work collaboratively with our clients to explore how their experiences of oppression intersect with those broader social issues, which can help our clients kind of move from a place of victimization to one of agency and empowerment. And I would argue Pride should have always had counselors available for lots of reasons, just even if we weren't in this climate, just being queer, families, all the things that play out. I mean, I know we have been at events lately where people have shown up with really gross signs trying to protest. Um, I've had people get in my face where my partner has stepped in, or where a friend or a community member has had to step in and just shield, which being a human shield is not a nice feeling. And I have to talk about that with my clients about like, there used to be protest kind of etiquette, right? A marginalized person is being attacked. We surround them, we shield them. Now it's more like we remove them from the situation, no matter how upset they are, how much their voice matters, because it's too much. It's too unsafe, right? So that's a big part of this, right? Letting our clients know, for example, Middletown Pride is probably a safer Pride to go to right now. So drive the hour from wherever you are to go to that one if that's something you want to do this year, right? For me, if there's a therapist there, go to that one. I know you'll be safe or safer than you might be somewhere else, right? So some of this, right, when we look at it that way, this was great because it's a nice segue, right? Identifying strengths when it comes to this, how we're building community networks and strategizing ways to participate in advocacy that reinforces a sense of identity and resilience, but keeps our clients safe and hopefully leaves us with minimal stress. I will just reiterate every time a client goes to a protest, my skin, I feel like I'm gonna get hot. Honestly, it is really stressful. So we make a lot of safety planning around that. So when we're talking about our clients or us participating in activism, safety planning, right? Writing phone numbers on your arms, sharing your location with people. We're going to talk about ways to keep clients safe where there are different texting apps and location apps and things that clients can do with friends, extra release forms for us to contact extra people, clients having plans with us about if I don't hear from you, if you don't show up for a session, right? If you don't show up to a meeting, like what do I do as the professional that values your safety and well-being? So we can extend our influence by contributing to public debates and policy discussions. So what I mean by that is stay safe in your house, call your senators, write your letters. You don't have to sign your real name if you don't want to. No one checks if they read them at all. But it's about us doing the thing to know that we've done it, even if it doesn't make the difference we want it to make. Although I would argue that if thousands of us flooded a system with letters, it would work. In 2000 and I'm going to date myself. 10 or 11, a group of art therapists got together, and our protest for reproductive rights was actually to make stuffed animals that look like uteruses or uteri. Is that it? Uteri. And we sent them all to the White House. We don't know what happened to them, but we're sure it was pretty shocking to open all those packages, right? Things that you can do that can make a difference without feeling like you're at risk are possible. You can also do things like write op-eds under a pseudonym, go to different community forums, right? A lot of our prides have boards. They have like these nonprofit boards they've made for each town's pride or group of people, and you can go to their community forums and find out how you can provide support. And providing expert testimony on issues that affect queer communities, right, to help shift public discourse and influence policy reform. I know some of my friends that are not in mental health, they're in mental health, but they're not master's level therapists per se. They do a lot of the peer support groups. They've actually gone to Hartford to talk about different bills, and there have been protesters there, which, like, why you let protesters into our public health meetings is like wild to me. And so groups of us might just show up to sit with that person, right? Those are things we can do without putting ourselves at risk or too much risk, right? But these also signal, right? Doing these things signal that the mental health of queer individuals is intrinsically linked to our social and political environment and that we care. Allyship is no longer good enough. A lot of people in the protest realm say co-conspirators. I don't know if I like that term. That feels a little subversive to me. I look at it as I'm not just being an ally to my clients, I am being a clinically appropriate friend, right? Because what do our friends do? You show up when somebody needs you, even if it's at a time where you can't necessarily show up, right? And unfortunately, that's being a therapist right now, is showing up even when we have no energy to show up. So this is a fun infograph. You will have this when you get the slides, but it's what we can do to help our queer youth specifically. So the HRC has a whole thing on it. You can go to their youth report. Their youth report was really incredible. And it gives us, I didn't want to like put tons of slides together with this, but it gives us some nice step-by-steps of how we can work with policy makers and advocacy leaders to help our queer clients. And anytime someone gives you something for youth, you can take out youth and put an adult, and it usually applies. We need to remember our adults might also be in school or getting a GED later in life, right? Doing things to better themselves where they will experience the same things, just on a different level. Oh, resilience. This is the thing that we're hoping for, right? So we're going to talk about the queer pathways towards resilience and healing, which is the hope in all of this, is that despite what we're in, we can help people maybe feel more empowered, right? So despite all the challenges we've talked about, the queer and trans community has historically demonstrated remarkable resilience. I'm sure most Pride's people will hear the whole Pride isn't a party, it was a protest. This is true. There's actually a bunch of trans activists in the Midwest that have made purses out of bricks and painted trans flags, and they walk around with them as a silent protest to remind people that it was actually trans women of color that are the reason why we have pride to begin with, and yet they're constantly left out of the conversation because you can be queer and still be racist. So that's another thing we need to think about is if you're sitting with a queer person who's a person of color, there is also a chance that they've experienced discrimination within their own community. And that needs to be discussed as well, right? So there's a lot of those grassroots advocacy and protest efforts and community support networks that play a crucial role in counteracting the damaging effects of hostile policies and societal rhetoric. There are some great trans-run peer support groups and support networks in New Haven. When I give you resources when we're not being recorded, I will give you that and the names of people you can reach out to for your clients. I think that's really important. I think we can only do so much. Our clients need people, and they need people that are like them, that understand these experiences in a way that we don't. Even if I have similar identities to my clients, I'm getting a PhD. Clearly, I'm privileged. I cannot understand what a lot of my clients are experiencing, right? In the same way. So, activism, community outreach, and the creation of safe and brave spaces are not just forms of resistance, they're actually crucial mechanisms for healing and empowerment, right? So, that's the other thing. When we tell our clients, go to this support group at the Pride Center, here's a peer support group that does. There's one that does like a sober Friday night for people that are queer and in recovery. There are places where they do safe and sober concerts, right? If our clients are in recovery, right? Where can we send people to have those empowering experiences outside when they're with us, right? So outside of a session, outside of a meeting, outside of a case management meeting, where can we help clients kind of get that empowerment and community and learn that resistance is sometimes just showing up and being together? So I do want to point out there are some encouraging future directions. It's not all doom and gloom, even if it feels like it right now. We know things usually get worse before they get better, but that doesn't change that there is still good things we can do and good to come, right? But moving forward, right, we can foster an environment that supports the psychological and social well-being of our queer and trans clients and our communities, right? Whether it's participating in politics or social transformation, um, donating a few dollars to that local peer support group so that someone can go for free. Um, I used to say grants, but I don't know what a lot of those look like for mental health right now, to be honest, right? And then looking, and I often say, like, you don't have to show up and do the thing, but if there's a progressive policy that's happening in Connecticut, for example, sharing that with your clients, right? So, are we looking at policies that affirm rather than marginalize and can kind of show our clients things are really hard and traumatizing right now, but also look, these are the people looking out for you. Because here's the thing, there might not be good bills on the floor in Connecticut, but that doesn't mean they're going to pass. And for all the bad bills that are introduced, there are a lot of good ones that protect people and a lot of good ones that have been passed throughout the years that protect the queer community. But most importantly, right, the resilience observed in our community often offers a hopeful pathway forward, right? The collective action and advocacy continues to challenge and transform oppressive structures, right? Pride, whether it's a party or a protest, is still an act of resistance. Showing up unapologetically as yourself in a therapy session is still that act of resistance. So I think that's the other thing is sometimes just by showing up, we are doing enough. So this is the part all about you all, because I do care about all of you deeply and your well-being. It is important, right? So I always look at activism as something that can actually support burnout recovery rather than cause burnout. I think everyone needs to engage in what feels safe and comfortable, right? But there's specific kinds of activism that are actually aimed at reducing burnout because it's not solely that personal endeavor, it's also a structural one. Um, my original research was actually on activism for burnout in counselors. This is something I'm really, really passionate about. especially as an art therapist, because I love activist art. It means you don't have to talk or say things. It means you can participate in something without having to really kind of do the whole over intellectualization thing, which is exhausting at times. So we can actually leverage our expertise to advocate again, right, for policy changes. We can promote mental health support for frontline workers, right? So those of you that actually physically go in the community, those of you that are case managers, those of you that do peer support, our recovery support specialists, any of us that don't do that exact frontline work deserve to be supported by the rest of us. That is really important. Because if you're the one out in the community talking to my client on the green, you're doing actually the harder job. I can remember working in community mental health and actually running out of the office and chasing a client on the green more than once. It is not a good time. I will never forget those experiences. And anyone that does that work needs support. And it's, in my opinion, my job as a licensed counselor who no longer does that work to support those people that do that frontline work. Because I can't do my job if you're not doing your job. That's the reality. If the system did what I wanted it to do, so I'm very idealized, right? People would have provisions for mental health days, funding for professional development in self-care specifically, and the establishment of community-based mental health coalitions, right? So TAG is actually one of those. Yay. This is really important. Just this showing up, even if you're hearing not so great things from me the entire time, this is helping with burnout because you're here, you're together, you're learning together, we're talking about the hard things. And you learn from being in this group who isn't on your team and who you can and can't go to. And that is part of learning how to manage burnout. So part of this is also like creating safe organizational spaces, right? So institutions that employ mental health professionals can play a really crucial role in creating internal policies that actually support activism without overwhelming people. Again, you're here, you're doing it. I don't even need to say it to you, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? This is part of that, right? So this could include formal recognition of activism, right, as part of your professional work, offering resources for burnout, facilitating open discussions about the emotional impacts of sociopolitical distress, and then collaborating with queer advocacy organizations. So I think this is great. There are already people doing this work. And if, as a therapist, because of your identities, your comfort and safety, risk to your job or to yourself, right? And that's just as important as your safety. You can actually work alongside those organizations to help them align their activism with broader campaigns without necessarily being involved, right? So if we're seeing that there's all these advocacy efforts for queer people, but we're leaving out trans people, if we're leaving out non-binary people, if we're leaving out queer people that are disabled or people of color, we can point out to an organization like, hey, you're trying, but you're doing a subpar job. There's a lot of implicit bias happening here with the amount of people that are left out. How can I help you learn to do better? That's how I started consulting and doing trainings, to be really honest, was just reaching out to a place and going, oh, the gap here is actually concerning. How can I help? And in that sense, right, I do the training and you come to the training and none of us are at risk. So our safety is maintained while we're doing the work. So these are things that not only enrich advocacy efforts, but they also create spaces where us as therapists and mental health professionals can find solidarity, share resources, and gain validation for the emotional work that we do. And I think that's really important. If you walk away with nothing today except feeling that your work is important and valid, then I've done my job. Because to me, now more than ever, I just want every therapist and every mental health professional and every community organization to hear you're like doing the good work and it's hard and it's scary and it's painful and you're showing up anyway. And like, thank you is not enough, but thank you is like what we have right now. So partnering with these outside organizations can actually be a buffer against burnout by reinforcing the sense that our work is part of the larger, more impactful movement. Right. And so that's important is right now we're in our little Zoom boxes, which I kind of like. It feels a little safer sometimes, right? These little Zoom boxes. My physical safety exists. Not that I would be unsafe with any of you. But in this moment, we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so if you like take a minute and really think about that, like showing up in a Zoom box, you're a part of something bigger than yourself. Like showing up today did more for your burnout than a lot of other things might have. I tell everyone, like, I love getting my nails done. Clearly, I like getting my hair done, right? All of those things are important self-care. They help me with my burnout. However, seeing your faces, that's done more for me today than the nails I got done last week or getting my hair done. And so I want to help everyone learn to create spaces where when we're working with queer clients or we're queer providers ourselves, that we are in spaces where burnout is just naturally neutralized by existing together. Also, people are free because times are hard and money is tight. And being this fabulous does cost money, and sometimes it's just how much money do we have, right? It's not like the government's going, oh, mental health professionals should get paid more. We should give more grants. So that's the other thing. Connection is financially free and the biggest investment we can make outside of our therapeutic relationships. So we also need to manage sustainability, right? So things need to actually work long term that can make activism that empowering source of resilience. And it can provide therapists and mental health professionals with a sense of purpose that's tangible. Um, and often, and I don't know about you all, I wrote this because it's how it feels for me, but like when I see my activism as part of an ongoing effort to create a more just society, I personally feel like it transforms those moments of despair into that collective hope and renewal. Like sitting here right now, I get to have some hope I did not have before logging in. Usually before these, I'm anxious. I'm nervous. I change 50 million things just in case. I doubt everything I have to say, and then I show up and I see your faces and I go, oh, everything's better. And those are the spaces that we need right now. So the other thing is we want to cultivate a narrative of empowerment for us and our clients, especially when we're working with populations like the queer community where the societal everything, as we've been saying, is just too much. So we can actually benefit from adopting a narrative that situates our struggles within the larger context of transformative change. So we can recognize that our advocacy work can actually contribute to long-term societal shifts, which offer a buffer against the immediate stressors of burnout. And this is kind of that forward-thinking perspective that can help sustain our energy over the long haul because we're in it for the long haul. This is not a short fight. And even if our current climate ended tomorrow, there is still a mess to clean up. And I don't know about any of you, if you're parents or you're the responsible child or you're the supervisor or anyone that's in charge of people in your life, you're constantly cleaning up. So hearing great after this, I have a lot to clean up is exhausting, right? So also we need to look at this as we have to sustain our energy for the long haul of this because that will help our individual efforts turn into that collective progress and resilience that we need right now. So I'm not going to make anyone say these things out loud, but I have some questions for you that help with managing and dissecting burnout. And I'm going to give everyone like literally 2 minutes because we're being recorded and I don't want to ask you to share out loud. To like look at these questions, think about what your answers are, maybe jot down a few things. And then when we get to that Q&A question portion, we'll revisit these. I never make anybody share. You also don't have to do the activity. This is just an offer for something that could be helpful. But I want you to think about like what is sustainable for you as an individual? Because all of you are balancing work and your life. And I don't know what your lives look like. I know what my life looks like. That balance can be very hard. So what is sustainable? What feels powerful versus powerless? Where do you feel you're able to step into your power as a professional, but then also as a person in whatever your identities are? And then what makes a change for others versus yourself? I find often the things that help change others also helps change me, but sometimes what the greater good needs actually harms us as individuals, and that is something we need to think about. And then the biggest and most important question of all, what do you actually have capacity for? What is there room for? Is there room? Some of us might go, I don't even have room for my job, let alone anything else. I'm just doing my best day to day. And that's okay, but that will help you assess where your burnout is, where your stressors are, what works and doesn't work. So this is a book I highly recommend for anyone who is very socio-political oriented as a mental health professional, right? Preventing activist burnout, because everything in here helps prevent clinical burnout. So it's a practical guide to stay committed, healthy, and resilient in our activism. And so for anybody that's like here today and goes, I want to do more, or I've been doing this and I'm tired, or I want to know how to support my clients that are passionate about this work, this is a great opportunity. You can get it through all of the big corporations, and most of our local bookstores will order it for you if they don't have it in. And I think it's also an audiobook and an ebook. So if you don't want to read it, you can listen to it. So I think this is the part for us that is important, which is just how do we help our queer clients protect themselves? Because we can't be with them all day, every day. And even if we were, we can't protect everybody all the time. We also have to protect ourselves. So I'm going to go through all the realms of kind of safety and protection for our clients, starting with physical safety, right? Physical safety, I think, is a really big one right now for us to consider. So first we have to think about, what does our therapeutic environment look like? It's be different for each of us, especially if you work directly in the community versus in an office, right? But do we have some level of intentionality in the design so that the space is affirming and physically secure, right? So for instance, spaces might include inclusive signs, right? And we're talking about what people look like and what language is used. Um, Also, do you have private entrances if someone feels unsafe, or security or escorts, things like that? Are there secure digital platforms for telehealth to protect clients' privacy? These seem like really simple things, but I had a supervisee tell me the other day that they were told to meet with a client on Google Meets through their personal Google email. That is not HIPAA compliant. That is a problem. And then there's also community partnership, right? So like we were talking about, connecting our clients to local queer community centers, support groups, safe housing initiatives, even therapists outside of ourselves that can help ensure the client has access to environments that are affirming and secure, right? Because these partnerships further extend to collaborations with LGBTQ advocacy organizations that can also provide crisis intervention services, right? So we aren't available all the time. Unless you're working for mobile crisis, then I'm sorry, you are available at days and times that can be extra stressful. And again, another set of jobs that I have a lot of respect for, because those are not easy, right? But if we can't be with our clients all the time and we're not the mobile crisis people, then we need to figure out what is available for our clients that's safe. Because I'm sure you all know, not every mobile crisis person is going to think how we think or how I think. It'd be nice if everyone was affirming to everybody all the time. That's the ideal world that I want to live in my brain, right? But we know that's not it yet, right? I always say yet because I hold on to hope. So, I mean, it's us figuring that out. So, for example, when this goes through, I'll send it to Rebecca to send to all of you. I actually have a friend, and she is starting a domestic violence service that would involve a mobile crisis unit that would actually go to domestic violence situations so that clients have support when the police shows up. And that would also specialize in helping people that are queer in domestic violence, because often when queer people experience domestic and intimate partner violence, especially trans people, they're told shelters will not take them and often are not believed. In fact, I was once in a training as someone who worked in a DV shelter that was told that women don't abuse other women. I'm watching faces. I'm like, yes, I was told that as a baby therapist. Yes, I was many years ago. Because that was the thought then. We're understanding now how wrong that thought was. But these are real things, right? So this was someone that saw a gap in not just our community, but all communities and went, well, let's see what I can do. So when it happens, I'll send it to you. But maybe you're inspired to figure out how do we do things like that? What can we put into place? Who out there is doing that that we can say to our clients, hey, this thing doesn't exist yet, but someone's making it. Would you like a connection? Oh, I know. It's not me. It's someone that I know, and she's like an angel, and is also an EMT, so has medical training, so can also show up and provide medical assistance if someone doesn't feel safe going to a hospital. It's a genius model. I'm super hopeful about it. So then there's also the emphasizing of self-care and risk assessments, and I don't mean our traditional risk assessments. I know we have to do those. I do too. Those are real. But guiding our clients through personalized risk assessments that encourage them to adopt measures that minimize exposure to potential harm, right? So this involves quite a few things we'll go over, but I want you to hear that, right? These are like we're talking about harm reduction. These are harm reduction based risk assessments and safety plans. So we're looking to minimize the harm. We're not looking to eradicate it because in our political climate, we cannot eradicate the harm. We can help people stay as safe as possible, right? So safety planning that is collaborative, that includes emergency contacts, safe routes for travel, guidelines for conflict resolution and de-escalation in hostile environments, right? If we have queer clients that have to travel to the South because a family member is there, and we know the environment they may or may not be in, not to demonize the South, it's just the experiences I've had with clients, right? We want to make sure they're prepared. I've looked at the map with clients and figured out, well, you can drive the extra 5 hours, but you avoid A, B, and C. That is a better option for them, right? Or if they're a cis queer client, like, yes, you can fly. That is safe for you, right? For my trans clients right now, I'm like, I'd rather none of you get on a plane. I don't want to get on a plane, right? There are some real fears there. So talking those through and making concrete plans we have documented, they have a copy of, that we know who to contact, that they know who to contact. Um, and if you all come to that other training that I'm doing, and I don't talk about it here because I'm doing the other training, we talk about brave space safety planning, which is different. That's far more harm reduction oriented, and far more client led than the traditional safety planning. And then there's health protection, right? So ensuring that clients have access to their gender affirming healthcare and medical resources. And that includes information on clinics that specialize in queer health, helping clients maintain physical well-being in contexts where their identities might otherwise expose them to discrimination or violence. This includes working with medical providers to help people stockpile HRT. And I would say that includes your cis clients or yourselves if you take hormones for any medical issues. That is something that is being severely threatened. We don't have many of those mental clinics, those medical clinics, but clients can also use an online platform called Folks, Folx, and they do all of the same things digitally and they work with your client's PCP and they do help with things like that, right? So making sure our clients know if a medication is restricted, that they will still have the access that they need for their health and safety. All right. Things that I really hate. Having a security system. Does your client have a security system? If they can afford one, this is the other problem. These are great suggestions if you can afford them. So I just want to put that out there, right? This is really real. I don't know if there are grants that would help us give these to clients. If there were, I would love it. I would go to every client's house and just be like, here's a security camera. But Ring is a really, really great thing. Anyone can buy it online or at Home Depot. It is $9.99 a month for them to hold recordings till the end of time, which you can then use in any situation where any like there needs to be legal involvement, right? But making sure that people have access to some level of security, whether their building has it, their home has it, what have you. And making sure if they have an app, so this is what I say to people all the time. So there's an app, you have it on your phone. My phone's gone off 50 million times since we started talking because someone keeps walking their dog, which good. Um, that's a thing that happens. It goes off all the time, but someone in my life also has the app and access to my account just in case something happens so that they have access to the recording and that they can see. There's also an app called Signal. It's free. You can download it. And Signal, it became famous because some politicians used it wrong. So it's interesting. So Signal is secure texting. It gets rid of your texts within 5 days. So what I say to clients is if you're a queer client and you're messaging a partner, you're messaging someone about your care, switch to Signal because no one can get those records the same way they can from a regular cell phone. Also sharing location, right? So if you have Apple products, you can share your location. If not, there's also Life 360. There are options. I encourage all of my clients to figure out a safe person that they can share their location with. Um, and kind of have boundaries, right? So if you don't hear from me within 48 hours of doing this thing, I need you to call my therapist and let them know. I need you to call me and figure it out. Whatever that safety plan is around that is important. The other thing is there are Apple tags and other tags you can buy. You sync it with your phone. You can put it inside your car, on your car keys, inside your purse or wallet. You can also put them in your shoes. Um, I say this, it's sad to say, but it's real. So I have a nephew who's under 5, and they now make little kid shoes where in the soles there's a part you take out and you put an Apple tag in so you can find your child. Right? So these things sadly exist for our safety. So hard and sad, but also important for our clients. Also, safe space meetings, right? If you ever feel unsafe and say client calls you and they say, I'm feeling unsafe, that's all they have to say, and you know the location they'll be at. And it might be you call the emergency contact and ask them to meet a client there, right? But where are places I can find you? And then again, like we've been talking about, right? Who's your community? People that have been rejected by their family, especially, right? Having queer family and having the discussion about like who are your people is really important right now because those are also the people we need to know about and work with. All of my clients have their usual emergency contact and they usually have release forms for 2 or 3 other people that they consider part of their family as part of kind of these physical safety plans. Emotional safety, isn't that fun? That's our jobs. And it's not easy. And all the bars just got in the way of all of the things. All right, there we go. Okay. So as we've been talking about, right, validation and affirmation, those are the things that we can do and we can teach our clients to look for in others, right? But again, right, validating those experiences of marginalization and discrimination, affirming identities, normalizing the emotional response to societal stressors, right, and discrimination, right, which can also help counter that internal stigma we had talked about and foster a greater sense of self-worth. I'm sure it's true for a lot of you. I know it's true for a lot of my clients and sometimes myself too, right? Self-esteem is like way down in the dumps when the world doesn't want you to exist, and we know self-esteem is a good protective factor. Also, emotional regulation strategies, right? Techniques for mindfulness, deep breathing, cognitive behavioral interventions, things that can help people manage the symptoms, knowing we can't get rid of the problem. And I often say to my clients, if I could DBT and CBT away discrimination, there would be none. I can't, but I can help you learn to tolerate as much as possible in the moment until you're in a safe space to feel your feelings. So again, right, promoting that community and that peer support. Again, I'll share those resources with you in a minute. And then support groups. If you or any of the places that you work with have them, at this point, I just kind of give clients a handout and I say, I need you to go to one a week because the world needs you to be with people. We can validate all we want. And I often say, if you're a therapist with shared identities of a client, Your validation will mean more than someone that does not have shared identities, but being in that group space where people are kind of learning to cope, to celebrate their identity, to cultivate that emotional resilience, and to have people of similar identities kind of reflect back those experiences is really important right now. And then I'm not going to read this whole thing, right? But the therapeutic alliance, like we were talking about, that authenticity that we were looking for, and empowering our clients through narrative reframing. So if anyone of you gets to know me or knows me, you'll know I love a good narrative. I'm big on narrative therapy. I like people owning their story. And I think stories of who we are and where we come from are important. So helping our clients reframe their experiences from one of victimization to agency is really important. Helping people recognize strengths and their resilience while also navigating oppressive environments can help our clients view emotional challenges as surmountable rather than insurmountable and foster a more empowered self-narrative that's not to invalidate the experience of marginalization and oppression. It's to allow a parallel narrative that happens at the same time where all of these negative things can be true and we can still grow and hold on to some level of hope and joy. So the legal piece, I think, is a big one right now. I know clients ask me about it a lot. I know if your clients haven't asked you, they probably will. And I'm going to be able to share some free queer specific legal resources when we're done. Um, so legal literacy and education. I don't know about you all. When I went into mental health, I didn't think I would need to become an unprofessional lawyer, but it's to the point where we do need to understand things we usually wouldn't have before. So we have to recognize that legal vulnerability often exacerbates clients' overall distress. So to address this, right, we can offer resource referrals, right, up-to-date referrals to legal experts, legal clinics, and advocacy organizations that specialize in queer rights. Often these partnerships help our clients navigate legal challenges that could range from workplace discrimination to issues related to identity documentation. If you notice, a lot of the cases that the ACLU has brought forward are usually people that have come forward and said, I'm experiencing this discrimination on a federal level. And that court case happens, and then it changes a federal law as a result of that one person coming forward. But it's state by state often. So our clients might need those resources to figure out what they're doing. A lot of the resources that I give you aren't just for free lawyers, but people that will just talk to clients that aren't us that can explain laws in a way that maybe we can't. I don't know about you all, but like sometimes I read the laws and I'm like, I don't understand. I just know that people don't like me right now, or don't like my client right now. So it's great to have legal resources that our clients can go to for expertise. I also believe in legal empowerment, right? Incorporating discussions about legal rights within our sessions, helping clients understand the protection that is available to them, right? Using that educational component as empowerment and admitting, I don't know, here's the people that do. Because I used to be the person that wanted to know everything, and now I've decided I only know what I know. Here's the expert to talk to. And then, like we've been talking about, right? Collaborating on advocacy for policy reform when possible and safe for you. Right. So also collective action, right? I'll talk to my clients about what that might look like, how they can be involved. And then as we talked about before, and I would say for all of you, you really don't have to do this. There are people that are doing this. When I share resources and we have our Q&A, I'll talk to you about people that are doing expert testimony and research. But there are therapists, there are medical professionals, there are lawyers that participate in policy discussions or provide expert testimony. And that kind of underscores the critical need for legal reform and reinforces the link between mental health, legal protection, and queer rights. Right. And then crisis intervention and immediate legal support, right? So in situations where our clients face imminent legal threats, right? We should be trained to. We are not. This is a very different environment than most of us went to school in. I don't know about all of you, but if someone told baby therapist Wednesday they'd be talking about this one day, I would have probably laughed and just been like, that would never happen. I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong. So developing the emergency protocols like we talked about, but this time it's what's the legal emergency protocol? What are the steps the clients need to take in an encounter of some kind of legal jeopardy? And that can include safety contacts, emergency legal hotlines, documentation practices that protect them against rights violations. For example, we are telling therapists if you work with trans folks, we are no longer using the code for gender dysphoria. Doctors are taking over that care and they're documenting it as the medical issue that it is deemed, which is an endocrinology diagnosis, which we are not qualified to give. So one of the suggestions from a lot of the big legal places is we don't have to have gender dysphoria in a chart anymore. Doctors take care of that instead. I hope that helps some of you. Also, a client can say they don't care, they want something diagnosed in their chart, and they get that, right? People have the right to self-determination. And then coordinating with crisis services, what crisis services are available for our clients when they're in this immediate legal crisis. Um, the biggest thing right now for people is traveling, and immigration related issues. So making sure our clients that, I mean, I want to say might experience that, but we are watching people that are not immigrants experience these issues regardless. So I give my clients just a list of all of the legal resources, hotlines that they can call, um, pro bono lawyers' offices they can call that can be helpful in these situations where we cannot be involved. Calling me when you're being held at a border isn't really going to do anything except me tell you that I care about you, right? That's not something we can do. I can call a lawyer for you, but half the time they won't talk to me if I'm not you. So making sure our clients are traveling and having that information on them is vital. And then here are some resources. We will talk with others. You will have this slide. But the big legal ones right now that are open to helping anybody, anywhere, Landom Legal. The LGBTQ Bar Association is national, but every state has their own chapter. So Connecticut has a chapter. They do pro bono work for queer clients. They will talk to you as a therapist. I highly suggest reaching out to them. There's the ACLU, GLAMA, and PFLAG, and the Trevor Project and GLAD are all working with the ACLU on a lot of the, global legal issues, and then resources for our clients, right? So the Trevor Project, PFLAG, Fenway Health Collective is out of Massachusetts, but they work nationally and they do give free trainings for therapists. They have a video log on lots of queer identities and intersecting subjects. You will see my face from many years ago on some of those trainings. And again, free for therapists. So that's a great resource. And then this is all of the suicide prevention hotlines that do still exist that our clients can use.